Hi. I tried to film this video once before, and it didn't particularly work out. So here we are a second time, alright, trying to film the same video. Today I wanted to have a little bit of a conversation about Muslim books and Muslim representation in fiction. So growing up, obviously I never really saw a lot of Muslims represented in fiction. The only one, shouts out to the Proud Family, them was the only people doing something, you know, for kids back in the day. There was this one episode of Proud Family where I believe Penny made friends with like a Pakistani girl, and they ended up doing like a family swap thing. I don't know if it was like an exchange. I mean, I don't know what it was, but she had to go live with the girl's family, and she learned a lot about like Muslims and Muslim culture, and it was really interesting. And it was so weird for me because I've literally never seen Muslims in any way, shape or form represented or seen in mainstream media that I used to consume when I was younger. Granted, I never really used to read books, but I don't think that books were much of a saving grace either. I grew up in the Caribbean, right? I'm from Trinidad, and saying that, I do plan on making another video just like this talking about Caribbean books that I plan to read and that I want to read and that I have read, but that's a whole nother video, so we'll talk about that at a later date. But growing up in Trinidad, you would expect that, okay, I would have seen some aspect of myself in the fiction that I consume, but no, I used to watch the same shows that a lot of y'all Americans used to watch. In fact, those were the only shows that I used to watch, and I never really used to read. And most books that we have down here anyway are still like books set in America, written by Americans, the same books that y'all grew up with. We never really had our own TV shows. We had like a few. There's like 1 or 2 movies coming out every like 4 years, and then we have other stuff going on, but as a population, the majority of us don't really support like local stuff like that. We mostly just eat what we're being fed, which is mainly American media. The only like local media that I think we have a grip on is music, but other than that, like all of the movies we watch, all of the TV shows that we watch, and most of the books that we read, like if you walk into a bookstore down here, sis, you will just see mostly white American books, a couple colored people here and there, and then there'll be this one like rickety shelf in the back with like overpriced Caribbean books, and that's the extent to how much we are able to see ourselves in the media that we consume down here. Especially when it comes to Muslims, you don't hear people talking about Muslims in relation to Trinidad or the Caribbean at all. It's like we're practically invisible. So for me, discovering a plethora, okay, using big words here, discovering a plethora of titles written by Muslims about Muslim characters, about the Muslim experience is so fascinating, and I'm so glad that we've reached a point where we are demanding these books and where these books are thus existing. There's a lot to be improved upon. There's the issue of not to hijack the black trauma porn conversation, but there is that issue as well when it comes to the representation of Muslims. So I'll talk more about these books in detail in a bit, but with books like Written in the Stars, Saints and Misfits, and The Love and Lives of Roxana Ali, you get stories that are primarily focused on like young Muslims struggle within their community with conservatism and fundamentalism and homophobia and sexism and that kind of stuff. Or if you don't get that, you get the A Very Large Expanse of Seas, you get The Lines We Crosses, and then you get The Love, Hates and Other Filters, which are all stories that primarily focus on young Muslims' struggle with like the wider community, mostly in like white majority countries, with things like racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia and that kind of stuff like that. So what I'm trying to say is that most of these books are about the Muslim struggle, and they're not just about, you know, being, you know, Muslim. They're not just, you know, your regular day-to-day stories where the main characters so happen to be Muslim. They're always about some bigger societal or social issue, which is fine. We need stories like this, we need books like these, but it's nice to also just see us not in the context of struggle. Struggle is a big part of the Muslim experience, but it does not define the Muslim experience, and I think that's very important for us to understand. And there are some Muslims who don't really struggle that much as well. For example, me. Muslims kind of belong to the narrative, the nationalized narrative of Trinidad, in a way that we don't in other countries, particularly white people countries. You know, I'm not an ethnic minority where I'm from, and that's a privilege, and even though Muslims are kind of a minority in Trinidad, we're a very big minority, and we are considered one of the 3 main religions, or 4 main religions of the country. So because of that, you know, we don't face the same level of Islamophobia. It's there. Islamophobia does exist in Trinidad, but it's definitely not as potent as it might be in places like the United States, the UK, Australia, basically anywhere we'd have like too much white people. So I'm not saying that I'm angry about the fact that a lot of these books are about the Muslim struggle. Obviously that's what's I don't want to say trendy, but that's what's topical, right? That's what everybody's talking about. And we haven't gotten to a point yet where people understand that Muslims are regular human beings who live lives much like the rest of the people on this planet, because we're all very similar in ways that we don't really think that we are. So these books are there to kind of demystify those narratives and also represent how those narratives negatively affect Muslims. But I think it would be nice for us to get to that point where we just have stories about characters who so happen to be Muslims, but they just do, you know, they're doing whatever, they're solving a mystery, they're going on a quest, says they're living their life, they're doing what they have to do, they, you know, all that kind of stuff. Another issue with a lot of these books is that I think people tend to forget that black Muslims exist. Black Muslims exist, and they are a very large portion of the Muslim community, but they are not nearly as represented as non-black Muslims in literature and in the books that we read. There's only one book that I could think of that I haven't read as yet. It's called Muslim Girl by Zakia, which is about a young black American Muslim girl that I really want to read. It's in my cart. I'm gonna buy it, don't worry. But that's one that is not on my physical TBR as yet, but I still thought that it's noteworthy to mention because it's one of the only books that I know of that follows a black Muslim character that I really want to read. So that's another thing that we need to work on, is kind of like uplifting the voices of marginalized Muslims who might not be represented enough when we talk about Muslims in general, right? So when we talk about Muslims in general, there's this like, you know, automatic assumption that Muslims are Middle Eastern and Arab, which is not the case. And then you have like, yeah, secondary to that, South Asian Muslims and Southeast Asian Muslims, but like other Muslims across the world, especially black Muslims and Muslims of the diaspora here in the Caribbean and in Latin America, people don't really talk about them that much. So I think it's important for us to also acknowledge that there are 1 billion Muslims on this planet and they all come from extremely different backgrounds. So whenever we talk about Muslims and whenever we talk about Muslim representation, we have to be conscious of exactly who we're talking about and not just be conscious of only certain groups and communities within who we're talking about, if you know what I mean. But that can only happen if we, you know, prioritize reading books by Muslims more often, and if we demand more books by Muslims more often. So that's what I'm here to do today. I'm here to share with you all of the books by Muslim authors that I've owned, because I feel like, you know, these would be really good books to recommend if you all want to, you know, take up the mantle of reading more books by and about Muslims and promoting the idea that we need more books by and about Muslims. And this is in no way meant to condemn anybody who does not own as much Muslim books, or who does not read as much Muslim books, or who does not even want to read Muslim books. So you don't have to if you don't want to. This is just me suggesting, right? But anyways, I've been rambling for too long and my throat is starting to get sore, so let's just get into the book, sis. Starting off with the books that I have read. I only have like 7 books that I've read, but I'll read more. That's why I have the TBR pile as well. So the first one is The Love and Lives of Roxana Ali by Sabina Khan. This is a book that I talked about in my most recent wrap-up, and I absolutely freaking loved this story. It's about a young girl called Roxana Ali who is gay, and her parents find out that she's gay, and all hell breaks loose. She's from America, so they take her back home to their homeland of Bangladesh, kind of on a whim because her grandmother falls ill there. But all of the issues that was about to ensue back home when they first find out that she's gay ends up getting taken over to Bangladesh. It's a really intense story. Wraps up a little bit wish fulfillment ridiculously, but otherwise it is such a gripping and enthralling story that I definitely think y'all should read. Written in the Stars by Aisha Saeed is kind of in the same vein as that one. It's about a girl called, I think it's Naila. She's Pakistani American, and her parents take her back to Pakistan and try to force her into a marriage because she had a boyfriend back home. It's a little bit ridiculous. Looking back on it, reading it a second time, but it's still a book that really means a lot to me because this is actually the first Own Voices Muslim book that I've ever read in my entire life. And I was like blown away while reading it because I was like, oh my god, I've never seen like myself or aspects of myself represented in a story before. So like I got the same feelings that I got when I was watching that episode of Proud Family. I was like, oh my god, this is so weird and so cool. Saints and Misfits by S.K. Ali. This is one of my favorite books. It's about a girl called Jana who is from somewhere in Illinois, I believe. She is sexually assaulted by a Hafiz in her community. A Hafiz is like a really revered person in the Muslim community who memorizes the entire Quran, and she believes that if she voices her concerns or comes out about what happened to her, she will not be believed because he is so revered in the community. So the book very much talks about how within a lot of Muslim communities there is this reverence for certain members for attaining certain you know, images, but not necessarily understanding that that's not who they are. That's not necessarily always who they are. A lot of people put on facades. So it's a book that kind of explores how that could negatively affect a lot of people in the community, and it's fantastic. Love, Hate and Other Filters by Samira Mad. This is her first book, and I read an arc of this year before last, and I really loved it. This is about a girl called what's her name again? Is it Maya? I think it's Maya. Yeah, Maya. Maya is going through a bunch of shit, and all of that is worsened when a terrorist attack happens in the United States. Maya is Indian American, she's Muslim. She's going through a bunch of shit, and then halfway through the story, a terrorist attack happens in the United States, and the person who is accused of committing the attack has the same last name as Maya, and as a result she and her family end up experiencing a shit ton of Islamophobia from their middle class suburban white American community. So it is quite an interesting read, very tough to read as well, but also very rewarding. Definitely give it a go. The Lines We Cross by Randa Abdel Fattah. This is one of my favorite books. So Randa Abdel Fattah is actually an Australian-based author. She writes a lot about She writes a lot about the Australian Muslim experience. And The Lines We Cross was originally published in Australia as When Michael Met Mina. So if you're from the Aussie land, sis, hello, mate. I'm sorry if I just offended all Australians. But if you're from Australia, the book is actually published as When Michael Met Mina, so just take note of that. But it is basically a story about a girl called Michael and a boy called Mina. Michael is from like a really right-winged, kind of racist, kind of Islamophobic family, and Mina is a young girl who originally came over to Australia from Afghanistan as a refugee. Both of them meet and their political ideologies clash, you know, and they have to kind of work through their own problems. Mina is dealing with the trauma of her past, being a refugee, being an immigrant, and Michael is kind of starting to realize that maybe the way that his parents see the world is not necessarily how he really wants to see the world. So it's a really interesting story that represents both sides very well. It holds the right-wing side very much accountable, don't get me wrong, but it also doesn't represent them as raging racists who just want to kill all colored people and who are irrational and unreasonable in every sense of the word. It does kind of show you that, oh, these people have a perspective that's not necessarily valid, but you could understand why they think that way. And I really appreciate that book for kind of showing us both sides without being a, oh, both sides are right kind of narrative, if that makes sense. And it's just a really wonderful story. If you like hate to love, if you like a cute little romance, and you want to read more books set in Australia, sis, what you doing? Read this shit. We also have A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahira Mafi. This is a YA contemporary novel by a very famous author who is the author of the Shatter Me series. I was struggling as to whether I wanted to include that series in this video, but I've never read it, but I don't know if there are Muslims in that series, even though the author is Muslim. So like, y'all could probably let me know in the comments down below if that's the case or whatever. But for now, we'll just talk about A Very Large Expanse of Sea, which was my favorite book of last year, mind you. And I made a whole video praising it. And it's a book that I definitely would very much love to reread later on this year. It is a contemporary story about a girl called Shireen who is Iranian American. She wears the hijab, she's Muslim, and the book is set in 2002, a year after 9/11. And it's set in a very small, homogeneously white community. Our main protagonist is attending a homogeneously white school. And at school she faces a lot of issues because people are just, you know, shitheads. They're very patriotic, they hate Muslims. It's right after 9/11, so obviously that tension is still very much in the air. She ends up falling in love with a white boy who ends up falling for her as well, and a lot of people oppose their romance because he's seen as the perfect all-American boy, whereas she's seen as the enemy. So it's a really interesting look at Islamophobia and patriotism in America through the lens of what is seemingly like a typical high school Mean Girls drama gone wrong. I really liked it. It's good. Read it. That Thing We Call a Heart by Sheba Karim. This is, or Karim, I don't know, in Trinidad we pronounce that name Karim. Speaking of pronunciations, I was supposed to mention this at the beginning of the video. Muslim is pronounced Muslim. 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 Right? Muslim. Not Muslim, not Muslim, not Muslim, Muslim. It's not hard. try it. Just try it. Try it. Just be a snake and say it. Right, that thing we call a hat by Sheba Karim. This this one is about a girl. What's her name? I don't remember the name of any of these people. Oh, Shabnam. That's such a beautiful name. So Shabnam, I can't remember too much what this is about, but basically she's sort of just dealing with her identity. She does not necessarily identify as a Muslim, but she is of a Muslim background. Her friend decides to start wearing the hijab, and she kind of feels a little bit alienated from her friend. She doesn't necessarily know if she wants to consider herself a Muslim. There's this kind of creepy little white boy who she's trying to get into a relationship with. It's a very interesting book. Kind of strange, but I liked it. And those, my friends, all of the Muslim books by Muslim authors that I've read thus far. As you can tell, they're all young adult contemporaries following young American girls, with the exception of The Lines We Cross, which follows a young Australian girl. So like, I could definitely do a lot better. I could definitely read a little bit more, a little bit outside of that demographic. But that's generally the type of books that I like to read anyways. I love young adult literature, and I love young adult contemporary. And that's kind of like my thing. So those are the majority of the books that you would see me reading. But you'll see a little bit more diversity in the books that I still have to read. So in no particular order, I'm just grabbing off of my TBR pile. We have Salt Houses by Hala Alian. This is a multi-generational story. I love multi-generational stories because I feel like they tell us a lot about how history and how our context and how our family's background is so important. And this one in particular follows a Palestinian family as they migrate throughout the world. Sounds interesting. Looking forward. Also very much looking forward to Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. This book is meant to be somewhat of a commentary, I presume, on the refugee crisis, in the form of a romance between a man and a woman who are from a Middle Eastern country, I presume, and they see these doors, like these doors start to appear, and the doors lead to other countries, like a magical realism, fabulous kind of novel. I've heard amazing things about it, so we'll see if I like it. Mohsin Hamid is definitely a very reputable author. We have City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This is a fantasy novel that is set throughout, like, I don't know where it's set in particular. I think it's like maybe like Egypt, because I see they're talking about Cairo, but like the map shows you, like, you see in Africa, says we have the whole Middle East, we have South Asia. So I presume that this book is very expansive. I'm not sure where the setting is, but it's written by a Muslim author. That's everything I know about this book. It's a fantasy and it's by a Muslim author. My criteria is not that detailed when it comes to buying books by Muslim people. So Randa Abdel Fattah, who I just talked about as the author of The Lines We Cross, is also the author of Does My Head Look Big in This? And this is a story about a young Australian Palestinian girl from Australia of Palestinian heritage, and she decides that she wants to start wearing the hijab. And this is met with a lot of trepidation from her family, who are concerned about her safety in doing so. It's also met with a lot of discrimination from people in her school, and then she ends up falling for this boy. You know, it's a young adult romance. It always has to have some kind of look like little white boy in the back. But I'm really looking forward to this one because even though I've definitely read books about young Muslim girls who wear the hijab, I've never read a book where the hijab is like the main topic. Yeah? Come in. Excuse me, my dad. Yeah, I'll come in! My dad is calling. So where were we? Right. So this book is one of the first books that I will read that is not just about a hijabi main protagonist, but where the hijab is like the main subject matter of the story. So I'm very interested to see how that is handled in this book. Randa Abdel Fattah, I should also mention, does not wear the hijab. She is a Muslim. So again, really interested to see how she handles this topic. We also have Amal Unbound by Aisha Saeed, author of Written in the Stars, which I just talked about. And Amal Unbound is about a girl called Amal, who is from Pakistan, and basically what happens is her family just had their 5th child, and as a result, finances are kind of tight. Amal has to leave school and work, and it's about her experience dealing with that. And this cover is really, really gorgeous. Aisha Saeed writes some really heavy topics into her books, into something that might seem like an otherwise light-hearted story, so I'm interested again to see how that is handled. This recently came out last week, and then my copy just came yesterday. This is Interment by Samira Mad, author of Love, Hate and Other Filters, which I just talked about again. And this one I'm very, very excited for. This is actually a dystopian book wherein Muslims are being put into internment camps in the United States. And we're following a young, well, I presume she's Indian American Muslim because that's what Samira Ahmed is. But I could be wrong. Her name is Laila. Lila or Layla. I think it's pronounced Lila, but some people say Layla. Also, Samira Ahmed's name. A lot of people say Ahmed. I know this to be pronounced Ahmed. The H is there for a reason, so I don't know, maybe I'm saying it wrong, but I think the correct pronunciation is Ahmed, not Ahmed. Just saying. That's pretty much all I know about this book, though, that it's about the internment camps, and that's all I want to know. I kind of want to go into this one blindly. The thing about this book is that it's not very far-fetched because, you know, in America, people are being put into cages, we know that, and then internment camps are a thing that are happening in China, you know, with Muslims being put into camps in China, look it up. So this is not a very far-fetched thing, and it is probably a, you know, a commentary on what the most extreme outcome would be if America continues on their right-wing anti-Muslim rampage, which is very scary. So very much looking forward to this one. It's super duper long. It's like almost 400 pages, I think. Yes, it's 381. Wow. So this book is long. I think it's probably because it's a dystopian book, so they kind of have to like show you what the world is like. I don't think it's anywhere like super far into the future. Like I don't think it's gonna be all sci-fi and stuff, but it definitely will be a little bit different. So that has to be contextualized, and I'm sure there's going to be like a romance and other little subplots happening. So I'm very much looking forward to this book. And it is also being made into a movie, so congratulations, Samira. I also forgot to mention a very large... This is being made into a movie too, so I'm so happy for both of these authors, Tahira and Samira. I'm so proud of them. I'm so happy for them, and I look forward to seeing y'all make it on the big screen. Sis, y'all better make a cameo in those movies. I'll be looking out for y'all in those movies. We have Shiba Karim's second, this is her third novel. Her second book was this one, which I talked about. I never read her first one, but this one is her third novel called Mariam Sharma Hits the Road. It is actually the first ever American road trip novel featuring South Asian characters. So big up. Break those glass ceilings, sis. This is about a girl called Mariam Sharma. She goes on a road trip with her friends Umar and Ghazala. They all have Muslim Pakistani backgrounds, but what I like about Shiba Karima, which I appreciate about her, is that she writes a lot about Muslims who are morally grey. The morally grey Muslim kids, the non-perfect Muslim kids, right? They don't read their Salah 5 times a day, but they also do things that are deemed un-Islamic, immoral, and in that regard as well. And I think that's a really important thing to talk about, because not all Muslims are perfect, and the whole idea of not all Muslims are perfect is in itself problematic, because just because you do something that's not necessarily Islamic doesn't mean that you're not a good person, and doesn't mean that your Muslim identity is invalid. Mariam doesn't exactly identify as a Muslim. Umar is very religious, but he's also gay. And Ghazala is, she's a hot girl. She's a hot girl. And it's a road trip story. I love road trip stories. I read a bit of this already, but I wasn't really feeling it in the moment. It was one of those books where it's like, not feeling this now, but I know I'll feel it in the future. So I had to stop, but I definitely do look forward to going back into this story. And I'm a sucker for road trip stories, so we'll see how well I like it. We then have an Ember in the Ashes by Sabata here. I don't know if this book should be here because I'm not even sure if the author is Muslim, but it was on a list of books by Muslim authors. But it's kind of in the same vein, I guess, as Shatami, because they're both written by Muslim authors, presumably. I don't know if this author is Muslim. And they're not about Muslim characters, even though they are written by Muslim authors. So I'm not sure if I should have included this video in this book in this video anyways. But I thought that I would show the book anyways. Who dragging their mother? Sorry, my cousins, they rearranged their furniture a lot. Okay, my battery is dying. The light just came off. I have to do this real quick. While we're on the topic of my cousins, I should say that I do live in an extended family unit. A lot of Muslim Indian people in Trinidad live like in extended family units. So we have like one compound and there's a bunch of apartments and we're all like living together. So my cousins live upstairs, and as I said, they rearrange their furniture quite a lot. And that is a good segue into this book, The Yard by Alia Inayat. Some people call their family compounds quite literally the yard, especially Indian people here in Trinidad, but other people too, right? And this book is one of the only books in Muslim family, which is amazing. I don't know if there's more, but this is the only one that I know of. If you all know of more, you could elucidate in the comments down below. That'd be great. But this is the first book that I know of like that. It's also a multi-generational novel taking place throughout the 20th century, looking at a family. It says that it's a moving story of love and redemption set in Trinidad. that exposes the fault lines of Indo-Muslim culture as it explores 3 generations of a family who move from being indentured laborers to wealthy business owners. Very much looking forward to this one because it's very relevant to my history. Who opened my damn door? It's very relevant to my history as an Indo-Trinidadian Muslim. And the last book that I have to talk about is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. This is a adult literary fiction, contemporary, I don't know, about an Indo-Muslim, Indian-American Muslim family. And that's all I know about it. And this is one of the books that Sarah Jessica Parker was really promoting. Really, really big. A lot of people like it. A lot of people was talking good stuff about it. So I am looking forward to reading this one as well. And I love a good family drama. That's it for this video. My phone is dying. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely, lovely, lovely day. Let me know if you've read any of these books in the comments down below. And until next time, inshallah. And by the way, Inshallah is a Muslim saying. It's Arabic for please God or by the will of God. So I say that at the end of all of my videos. So just in case you didn't know what I was saying, that's what I'm saying. So until next time, inshallah, keep reading. Also subscribe and do all of the nice things. Okay, bye.